back. This is going to be episode 2 of the Shoddy mic podcast, where we use our absolutely terrible mic quality to bring you some analysis on Major League Tag Pro. I am joined by the Season 8 Eastern Conference Captain of the Season and the second overall defensive team player, jjpoole. He is the neighborhood curmudgeon of Tag Pro. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well.
That's good to hear. All right, and we're going to go back in for the final 2 remaining divisions, the Pacific and Northeast. And again, I'd like to remind everyone that we are going to say some pretty aggressive opinions at times, so please don't take it personally. And also, for the Central teams, neither me nor JJ are particularly well-versed in the deeper players on the West.
Yeah, we know a bit about the higher tier players, but the players coming up from minors and stuff, me personally, I'm not going to be talking much about, so I don't make any dumb opinions.
Yeah, I would tend to agree.
I'll try to stick to what I know and talk about that.
Alright, let's hop right in to the Pacific Division, starting with Angry Balls Redux. Spiller is back in the Central Division, and he's a captain again, and he picked up a couple interesting picks in MC Ride at the beginning, and then he followed him up with some other solid players in Ukilum and Unoriginal SN, and ultimately getting in a trade, trading Jay for Alvin.
And he also traded with me and picked up Wayne.
So he actually has 6 players at this point, right?
Yeah, he's the only player in the draft, or that left the draft with 6 players.
So he's already got a pretty good start to his minors team, but what do you think of his majors team? It's probably going to be something like Spiller and Unoriginal on D and Ukilum MC Ride on O.
Yeah, and he's got Wayne and Alvin as possible options for offense, or what, if they show up, could be a very good minors offense. He got a little bit of crap for picking MC Ride or Blue Monday, as he is this season, kind of early on, for a cheap amount. But I didn't really hate it. I kind of did that with Prism last season, where I knew Prism wasn't going to be my best player, but I wanted to get him early so that I could lock him in, make sure I have somebody that I wanted, and then figure out how much money I had left to go get the other players that I wanted. So I think it was a good move to get somebody who's might not be the best major starter, but is going to be a major starter in all likelihood, and just like lock that up early and then get the rest later on.
Yeah, if you know you really want someone early on and you think other people are going to be apprehensive, there's a good chance you can get him for cheap. So I think that ended up working out for him. My biggest question is, I don't look at this roster and see anyone of like particular outstanding talent, but I feel like as a Spiller team, they're going to spend a lot of time with each other and develop some really good chemistry. So I'm not sure if that is going to be enough.
I think Ukilum's pretty good.
Yeah, I would say it's probably above average West Coast offense, but I don't think he's elite.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of different than in the past, where if people did think that the Central offense wasn't that good or whatever, they're playing against the other Central teams, or at least the Central Division, 2 different times. So in the seasons past, if a Central team wasn't that good, they would just get beat up by the Origin teams. But this season, even if you can't compete with the Fatal and the Dinos in terms of offensive talent, you get to play against the other Central teams that also might not have the talent.
I think the other big question is, after a pretty lackluster season last season by Spiller, which I think for the most part wasn't completely his own fault, do you think he's going to return to being one of the better defenders in the league this season?
I'm not sure. Spiller seems like off and on a bit to me. Like, there are times when I'm like, damn, Spiller's pretty good. And then there are other times, I think it might have been skewed a bit from last season because he didn't have the best supporting cast, but it's just like, is Spiller that good? Is he actually as good as people think he is? I think a change to the West is going to help. Obviously, just ping-wise for one thing. I think he'll be all right this season. I don't know if he'll be a top tier like he used to be, but
yeah, I think it'll
definitely be an improvement from last season for him personally, and almost definitely for his team.
Yeah, I think it'll be better for him to be with a defensive partner that he's more comfortable with and Unoriginal, as opposed to like the revolving door of defensive partners he had last season.
Unoriginal is very solid. I was looking at him a couple seasons ago. Did you play with him on KG Ball?
I never did. He played on their season 6, and I played season 7. I know from talking to Stalin that he thinks very highly of his ability to like communicate and make smart decisions.
Yeah, he's very good. Like I said, I was looking at him, and I think it was after season 6, because I would hang out with a couple of the KG Ballers guys that he was around, and I got to know him a little bit, and he's pretty decent. I think he'll be all right.
Personally, looking at the overall team, I don't think they're going to be one of the powerhouses of the West, but I think they'll win some games. I think they'll be solid.
They'll be all right. I think some of these power rankings that have been coming out have been putting this team at the bottom or towards the bottom. But I don't think it'll be a bad news balls thing again for Spiller where they can't beat anybody. They'll be competitive at the least in the games.
Yeah, they may end up towards the bottom, but I don't think they'll be getting blown out week to week.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. We're going to head on to Holden Gate Warriors, the Central team that a lot of people think will be one of the most competitive teams in the West. And Curry was the captain, and he started off really strong, picking up Ibis, who is pretty much the consensus #1 Western defender, for just 51.
He got him for 51, which seemed a little bit weird to me.
Yeah, and he followed up with some...
Ibis is very good.
Yeah, playing him in USC, Ibis probably should have gone for more than that. But moving on,
yeah,
he got Doddsfall, Big Bird, and Man Bear, which I think all of those guys could reasonably deserve a shot at majors. But we'll see how that lineup ends up shaking out.
Yeah, Man Bear played for TPR's Cappers Delight last season in the second half and then in the playoffs. He's been around for a bit. I think he's been underrated. I think when he was a novice, he was better than a novice player. And then obviously last season when he started in minors, he was better than a minors player. But he wasn't that great last season in majors. I mean, he played with TPR, so it's kind of hard to look bad. But Man Bear is just the guy that's going to go around and scoop up all the pups. During tryouts before season 7, and we were scouting, and we were like, Man Bear might have a power-up script.
In 240 minutes last season, he had a 15% pup percentage, which is pretty high.
He would get every single power-up in all the tryouts that we had him at. I have heard Man Bear didn't do some of the little things like block for TPR to get on a base. If Man Bear had just died and TPR was coming in, Man Bear would just run straight to regrab or straight to a pup and wouldn't set a little hip check going across the middle, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of stuff you get when you play in majors long enough and you develop chemistry with someone. You start to find those little idiosyncrasies. Yeah,
but he'll definitely have to step up because Curry isn't TPR.
Yeah.
So Man Bear will have a bigger role to play.
I remember doing some statistical analysis over the season, and I thought some of Curry's numbers showed that he pops and flashes a lot more than a lot of other majors offenders. So I think Man Bear is going to have to step it up to make up for some of those deficiencies. But Curry's not a bad offensive player. He's just can make some poor decisions at times.
And this defense should be very good. Ibis has had very good defenses for the past couple of seasons, or at least shown himself that he's a very good defender the past couple of seasons, and he's been playing with Private Major, who for either the second or third draft in a row hasn't even been picked in the auction.
Yeah.
He's not as quality as a Doddsfall or even Big Bird. Big Bird plays on Mortal Kombat.
In USC.
I think that's correct. In USC, yeah. And we've played him a bunch, and he's always tough.
He's very solid, Let's talk about the Doddsfall pick for a little bit, because obviously there was some drama going into the draft about Doddsfall, saying he didn't want to play for Sentra captains and ended up getting suspended for the first 2 weeks of the season. And then he ends up on Curry's team.
I mean, it is kind of funny that Doddsfall ends up on a Sentra team after talking shit on Sentra, but kind of how it goes. You don't always get to pick where you want to go.
I don't know
if Doddsfall is all that great. He's good, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if he's above average. I mean, maybe in the Pacific Division he'll be above average on defense, but I don't think overall he's all that great. I think he's a bit overrated just from being on that Capitalist team.
Yeah, I think everyone on that team kind of got a little overrated, but we'll get back to that later. But I actually heard some rumors that Doddsfall actually planned on finding his way into Curry's team, and that shitting on Sentra teams was his plan the whole time.
I don't know about that.
Maybe that was manufactured after the fact to cover it up. But first of all, the pick of Doddsfall was really smart by Curry, because he then got Big Bird to at least fill in for the first 2 weeks while Doddsfall's not there. So he's not really going to be left without a battle.
From what I've seen in USC, I think Big Bird might be more talented than Doddsfall, but Doddsfall is notorious for playing that support role off of a high-level aggressive defender, which he's played with in Eagles and then last season with Sweep.
Yeah, Doddsfall is kind of like the stereotypical two-way player who can kind of do everything, but he's not really elite at any particular part of the game.
Yeah, like I said, I think Big Bird might be better, but the pair of Ibis and Doddsfall might be the best pair that this team can put out there.
And I think that's not really a bad problem to have when you have two defenders that can both be plugged in.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, I think I would agree with a lot of the preseason rankings that this team is going to be near the top. I think, especially with the division they're in, they're going to be better than both Role Models and Angry Balls. I think they'll be at least on par with Texas Hold'em, so they'll be a pretty scary team.
On paper, probably first or second in this division.
All right, let's head on to the team we just mentioned in Role Models, captained by Sundown, who was a replacement captain for Ibis.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about that.
And he picked up D-Wiz for 47, and I'll talk about this little pick for a while because I was the one that bit him up. D-Wiz currently lives in Michigan, and he's playing on a Sentra team, which, first of all, I think that's kind of weird. But I felt like D-Wiz was probably the best support O left. So I was willing to spend almost my full tag coins on him, but I think Sundown realized that with 100 tag coins left and the talent quickly coming off the board, he had to make a big play. And I think he probably overspent for D-Wiz, but I think it was a necessary move.
Yeah, because Sundown after the first round of the auction was without any players. We didn't have many top-tier Central players left to go after, so I think that's kind of why he expanded his range a little bit and looked at D-Wiz.
Yeah, I think D-Wiz is someone that's going to be like a solid, reliable player, like regardless of the team around him. He's not going to necessarily win you games, but he's not going to cost you any. And he's overall pretty good at a lot of different things in Tag Pro. He's going to be joined by most likely Apop and Koala. My only concern is that D-Wiz, Apop, and Koala, in my opinion, are all best fit as offensive players, but Koala's most likely going to have to play defense.
Maybe. I've seen a lot of Apop. I used to help out Apop. He used to be on, I think it was Troball's novice team. It was maybe Sanuku's minors team. I used to help out with both of them back in the day. And Apop was on that team. I think it might have been Troball's, because then Troball brought him up to minor for a couple loans a couple seasons ago, and he did really, really well. It was when Troball's minors team like couldn't score a cap for like the first 3 weeks. And they brought up Apop from novice for a loan, and Apop scored like 6 or 7 caps in 1 week. And I think that kind of put him back on the radar, because I think he like couldn't make Monday nights back in the day. I've heard some things about his availability. I don't know how true that is, because I didn't really have to look at him for this draft. So I don't know, but if he's available, I think he's starting majors quality.
Yeah.
I don't know about on this team, but like D-Wiz and Koala might be better. But if Apop is your third attacker, that's like really, really good.
Right.
But again, yeah, we could see him starting along with D-Wiz on offense and then having Koala on D.
I think the question mark is Ignatius on this lineup, because personally I've never really seen him play, but if he ends up having the potential that Sundown probably thinks he does, I think Sundown and Ignatius on D with Koala on D-Wiz might end up being their best lineup.
Ignatius was pretty decent in minors last season on defense. He had a bunch of returns, was pretty high up on the rankings. And maybe Sundown thinks he can like groom him a little bit and get him up in the majors and take that next step.
Yeah, and I think one interesting part of this team is that in a Pacific Division where the other two Centra teams are pretty much loaded with people that are all really close to the Centra server, none of these players are particularly close. Sundown is in British Columbia, Koala is in Idaho, D-Wiz is in Michigan, halfway across the country.
Yeah.
And Apop is in...
I think Apop's California.
Yeah, Apop I think is California, but Ignatius is Colorado, so that might end up being a disadvantage for them.
Yeah, and they're going to be on Sphere, both for the Texas Hold'em game in their division twice, and then against all the Origin teams. So
essentially half their season.
Yeah, so like Sundown from British Columbia and Koala from Idaho might not be the best. Even D-Wiz from Michigan.
Overall, I think they have some decent talent here, and they're not going to go out and like destroy any teams. But again, like we talked about with Angry Balls, I don't think they're going to be a pushover team like we saw.
I see this team as like the Western version of BMX 2. They're just all solid, but none of them can really like win you games by themselves.
I think the difference between whether this team is a borderline playoff team or a bottom of the West team is how much chemistry they can build and whether they can find the right lineup with what they have. All right, and that's... Oh, we still have one more. Probably the one people want to hear about the most in Texas Hold'em, who is a Sphere team led by Dalek. And I think he probably got... Well, we'll talk about this, but he got All Tiger for 76 and followed him up with Side, Yank, and Ukilim. And I talked to him a few minutes ago, and his starting lineup as of now is himself and Side on D with All Tiger and Ukilim on O, which I think is probably tied for the most talented lineup in this division, along with Curry's team.
Yeah, but this is another one where Sidewalk, I want to say he's from Ohio, I believe.
Yes.
So they're going to be a Sphere team, but they're still going to be playing Centra for what, 6 games this season? 6 full games?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, half Centra, half Sphere. So I think that was probably what went into picking up Yank. He might be
and Yank's very good.
He's on Pro Combat also, isn't he?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Him and Big Bird are the defense for that team that we play in USC a bunch.
Yeah, and I think overall this team is going to be really good because of All Tiger, who went for 76, and we're going to talk about him being potentially a top 2 or 3-0 in this league. What's your opinion?
Not the league. Definitely not the league.
Oh, okay.
I mean, he might be, but I think it's safe to say that him and Fatal are 1 and 2 in the Western Conference of Western players. I'll say, excluding Dino. He's not a Western Conference player yet, I guess.
Exactly.
But yeah, Fatal and All Tiger are 1 and 2. I would say. I think All Tiger is right there with Fatal. Like, it wouldn't be that hard to convince me that All Tiger was better than Fatal. I don't know if I would put All Tiger ahead of Fatal, but I wouldn't necessarily argue that.
Well, I think someone that ultimately chose to pick Fatal over All Tiger was Troball, who has a really close relationship with All Tiger, but yet chose Fatal.
It might have to do with All Tiger's like schedule. Like Fatal's much more available than All Tiger. And like All Tiger is notorious for having to like leave practices or even games when he was in minors, like in the middle of the game, if like curfew or whatever came and he had to go to bed.
And one part that might actually exacerbate that problem is that All Tiger is now playing a lot of games against Sentra teams on Sentra. So those games are probably going to be later than they were when he was on an Origin team, which could conflict with his mom's need to have him in bed by 10 o'clock.
Like I was saying, I think him and Fatal are 1 and 2. I think people in my opinion, overestimate the gap that is between Fatal and All Tiger. Like I forget whose rankings it was, but they were saying how Fatal is going to carry Mathnasium because all Fatal does is make his other offensive players better.
Mm-hmm.
But then they were like, can All Tiger carry somebody who's not as good as Milksteak? Like, we'll see. Fatal has played only with Ballstar, Lipsy, and Krosky ever in majors. So like, I'm not saying he's not going to carry Mathnasium. We're not going to do very well this season, but like, we don't know that Fatal can in majors. He's as unproven doing that as All Tiger might be. People are like, oh man, it's Fatal. He's so good. He's going to carry whoever. I don't necessarily understand why all that love goes to Fatal and not as much goes to All Tiger when talking in terms of that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I'd also like to say that All Tiger playing with Milksteak last season, I was a teammate of Milksteak in Season 7, and as great as he was technically, and he had a great season last season, Milksteak is very prone to mental mistakes. So All Tiger, he wasn't carrying Milk, but he had to make some like changes to his game. So I think All Tiger is a player that can adjust to his offensive partner while still being great at holding the flag and great at getting caps.
The one thing I will say about maybe Fatal being able to do a little bit more this season than All Tiger, Fatal has Grant.
And Dalek and Sidewalk are not slouches on D, but
for sure.
They don't have like the defensive stopper that Tears does with Grant.
I think Dalek and Sidewalk might be both better than Dude McGuy, but they're not anywhere close to Grant individually. And I think Ukelum's, like, I haven't really seen too much of him personally, but from what it sounds like, he's definitely at least like a borderline majors quality player. So it's not like All Tiger is going to have to do everything. Like Ukelum will hold his own, do well enough that All Tiger can do his own thing.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to get information on Ukelum because there's like 2 or 3 guys with that exact same name, so it's hard to keep them straight. But I think overall Texas Hold'em is going to be in the discussion for one of the best Western teams, and definitely is going to be going head-to-head with Holden Gate to determine who's going to be the team that comes out of the number 1 seed in the Pacific.
It's another one of those good, but maybe not super great teams. Although, if Ukelum and All Tiger can mesh well, then they have a little bit more potential to be a great team than the role models, I would say. Although the role models might have like a higher floor.
All right, that's going to be the end of the Pacific Division discussion, and we're going to take a quick little break and then come back with the Northeast Division where both of our teams play.
Yep.
And we're back, going into the second half of this podcast where we're going to be continuing to discuss the auction draft analysis, and we're on to the 4th and final remaining division in MLTP, the Northeast Division, where both myself and JJ are captains. And we'll start it off with my team, the Adrenaline Spikes. And I think when we're talking about myself and JJ's teams, we're going to primarily try to have the less biased person give their input.
Like, I'm going to explain maybe why I picked my players, but then Neb's going to,
critique.
Yeah, critique and then, try to analyze what might happen.
So, with my team, I started off with Romulus in the first round for 52, which I was actually in bidding war with JJ to get to that.
Yeah, we were fighting each other.
And I ended up with 52, which I thought was a pretty good price. I probably would have gotten a little bit more to get him if I had to.
Romulus had 50 caps last season, right?
Right. I feel like Romulus is pretty much on the border between a really good offender and an elite offender. So I wasn't really afraid to have him be the number 1 offense on my team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He's not the top of the top, but he's definitely up there competing with those guys for.
And my big plan after getting him was to go after D-Wiz, but as we talked about earlier, Sundown was more desperate for him than I was. So I ended up going with my second option, which I think a lot of people probably thought was my first option in Russia, because me and him have history. And I think it's really easy for people to look at someone like Russia and not really want to have too much faith in him because he didn't play last season, and he only played half a season of majors in Season 7. But I think he's going to be really solid.
Yeah, I think the thing with Russia that people kind of downgrade him for is just his intelligence and decision making. Like, he has all the technical skill there. Like, he's really good at juking, can do the boosts, and like he knows his maps and stuff. But it's just knowing when to grab, knowing when to go for some pups, knowing when to help your partner out of base, and like that kind of thing is that if there's something to downgrade him on, that's what people tend to look at.
How to get my offense to limit themselves to good grabs might be a problem for me this season, but I've actually been really impressed with how they go for pups. Russia in particular has been much more advanced than I was expecting. I haven't really had to push him as much as I thought I would have to. But moving on to my defense, I ended up getting Prism for 42, which was the remaining balance that I had at the time.
And which was the overspend of the draft.
As many people would say. I can see why people would look at that. How you someone like Eagles going for 44 and Stan going for 48, and then looking at Prism going for 42 and being confused by that. But at the time, it was basically a guarantee that I was going to get a player that I really wanted. If I had waited out and maybe tried to get him for 35 or something, I was running the risk of Bali bidding 42 and screwing me.
Yeah, you were asking me a couple weeks leading up to the draft whether I was going to be keeping Prism or not, and I wasn't really giving you an answer, but you were definitely interested. Well before the draft started. I wasn't like, oh man, Prism's the only one left, I got to spend all my money on him. It was like you were looking at him.
For sure.
He's a good defender. I played with him last season, obviously. I feel like you'd agree with this, that you play like me, but a little bit worse. Like, so Prism, like, you kind of are the same as me, that you work off your defender and you like change up your style a little bit, like work better as a pair. And Prism's really aggressive, or he can be really aggressive if his partner allows him to be.
I think overall my team is going to be more competitive than a lot of people are thinking. I think it's really easy for someone to look at my team and think there's not a whole lot of established stars, including myself.
You can be fighting for playoffs. You'll be one of the lower playoff seeds if you make it, but you'll be in the mix for at least most of the season.
I'm not going to go honey bear and say I'm going to sweep every week, but I think I have pretty realistic expectations that we're going to be in the hunt for playoffs. Move on to All Caps, who made the biggest splash in the first round of the draft, with Ball Don't Lie at the helm, picking up Halsey and Eagles, who are two really big names that have never played in the East before. So that'll be a huge question mark in my opinion.
I don't know if it'll be a huge question mark. It will be interesting to see how they adjust, both ping-wise and then, again, maybe playing to a little bit better quality.
Yeah, I guess
teams.
Maybe the question wasn't so much that I'm skeptical of them being able to play on Radius. It was more me being skeptical of them having taken a season off and coming back.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, I've played against Halsey and Eagles a bit in PLTP. We played them a couple times. At least during those games, I don't want to make the generalization that they're not as good anymore, but in those games, they definitely weren't up to the Halsey and Eagles quality that we saw in Season 7. Both of them individually, I don't think showed as much, in my opinion. I think from what I gathered, I was playing defense, so I obviously wasn't like watching the whole thing, but from what it sounded like, Eagles might have been the weaker of the two, or at least might have dropped off a little bit more of the two, at least, again, during those PLTP games.
Yeah, and I think Halsey is pretty active, and Eagles is kind of a question mark there, but I feel like if the two of them are on enough, eventually they will get that spark back, and we'll start seeing more and more flashes of them, of their Season 7 performance. But the two reasons I don't really place this team as a lock for being in the playoffs is, one, they have either Cynical or Fat, and Fat is, I'm 99% sure, not going to play.
Fat's not playing. Fat told me before the draft not to pick him.
Yeah, and I think the biggest reassuring factor, like during the draft when Fat went, was that you didn't bid on him. So I was like,
yeah,
if there was any chance of him playing, JJ would bid more than one on him.
I was joking with Fat before the draft, and I was like, Fat, like, to try to screw over the other teams, if I nominate you in the auction, is somebody going to bid on you? And he said, like, it wouldn't be worth the risk to do that. But he said if somebody would, it would be Ball Don't Lie. And then Ball Don't Lie bid up whoever nominated Fat for 0.
That is funny.
Kind of funny, yeah.
And you know a lot about nominating people that don't get bid on, but we'll get back to that later.
True.
And so the other the first big question mark that I was talking about is Cynical being a Majors defender, because he's put up big numbers in the past, but his play style and his attitude are not what I would call reliable.
Yeah, he put up big numbers on a Season 7 Balkani's team that might have won like 1 or 2 games, maybe. And it was a style that, I mean, most of the other defenders, I would say, didn't really buy into.
Yeah.
Like, I remember my team played him the last week of the season, and he had like a killer kill-to-death ratio.
Yeah.
And he boosted across mid on Smirk at the start of the game, got a rolling bomb from the middle, and like made it through the middle, like untouched. So he still had the rolling bomb. Either Stan or I defused the rolling bomb, but he was still in base, like on offense. Like he was legitimately in the base, and he just walked back to defense. So he didn't grab and die and get a death. I assume that's what the rationale was. But like
either that or he just really isn't confident in his offense at all. But either one could be applicable.
He just seems kind of individualistic in terms of his defensive style.
Yeah, and I think if Eagles and Cynical is going to be the long-term solution for defense on this team, Eagles is pretty much going to be forced to take a less aggressive role and essentially play a more like adaptable role, like me and you were talking about.
Yeah, again, from an outsider's perspective, it seems like if somebody is going to change up what they're going to do, it would be Eagles. But I'm not necessarily sure that that's the one that you would want to change up.
Yeah, that's true. But then again, if we were talking about Eagles kind of being a little rusty, if he ends up not being able to get back to form and his ability to get one-on-one returns isn't as elite as it used to be, maybe that kind of fits.
They could kind of defer to Cynical.
Yeah, maybe the puzzle pieces end up fitting together that way.
Yeah, maybe.
And my other big question is Ball Don't Lie, because last season he put up some pretty good numbers. He was playing with a pure support offense and big swinging, and even that I don't think their offense really worked that well.
I think it worked all right.
I mean, it wasn't bad, but I felt like Yas and Fat were kind of the steadying factors.
I think
a little more up and down.
Swinging was the steadying factor.
That's true.
I think Swinging was the best player last season on that team. Like, not necessarily in terms of talent, but just like who played the best.
Yeah.
Like I looked up before because when they made that trade for Helen Keller.
Yep.
And like there was a question whether Helen Keller would start over Swinging. Like I looked up the stats. Swinging, when Ball Don't Lie played with Swinging, Ball Don't Lie had like 5 caps per week or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Ball Don't Lie was playing with Helen Keller, who obviously is a step down from both Big Swinging and from Halsey, so maybe this doesn't mean much, but it was like 2 or 3 caps per week.
Yeah.
It was like a huge drop off when he didn't play with Swinging.
I think the one comparison you could make from Helen Keller to Halsey is that neither of them are particularly keen on playing support offense. Halsey's not like a selfish player, but I think his best asset is being able to grab.
Yeah, Halsey's very good at, or at least he was in Season 7, very good at grabbing.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the kind of, that skill set isn't really used to its full potential if you're just trying to get your offensive partner out.
Yeah, and he played with Ballstar in Season 7. Yep. He was definitely one to set up blocks to get him out of base and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I think just overall, neither of them are particularly known as being great at offensive defense or being smart about their grabs. Halsey's great at pups, which I think is good,
and he's really good at communicating. So is Ball Don't Lie, I guess.
Yeah, I think overall there's big question marks there, and I don't think they're going to be as great as looking at those teams next to each other. You think that's going to be a pretty good offense, but I don't think in practice it's going to work out as well as it seems.
Yeah, I think Ball Don't Lie had a pretty solid first round where he got Halsey and Eagles, but then the last 2 picks could have been a bit better, probably.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you got another better defender, maybe like a Balloon or something, it would have looked better on paper.
I think looking at this team as a whole, it's got a pretty high ceiling just because Eagles and Halsey reaching full potential is kind of really scary to play against. But at the same time,
Cynical has the talent.
Right. If everything goes right for them, they could easily be one of the best teams in the East. But if everything goes wrong for them, I would not be surprised at all to see them miss the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. And even it kind of has to be said, last season, Ball Don't Lie had the most perfect draft, I would say, out of anybody.
Pretty much.
But that team still didn't make the playoffs. If Legman had picked the team that Ball Don't Lie picked last season,
that's a Super Bowl
where he got
team.
Yas, Fat, and Big Swinging, yeah, that team is in the Super Bowl.
Easily.
And Ball Don't Lie picked that team, and not that it's all his fault. He had Swinging quit partway through, but that team didn't make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. And we'll move on a little bit because I know you got places to be coming up soon. So we'll move on to Base Gods, which is captained by Raven, who is moving back to the East after a season captaining in the West. And looking at his draft, there's a lot of decent names. He's got Mr. Gone, BDL, and Big Swingin', who we were just talking about. But I don't see anyone that's really going to be seen as a super above average great player.
Swinging, in terms of being a secondary offensive player, Swinging is about as good as it can get. Like, just in terms of support and getting people out of base. I think he's very underrated in the community.
I think he
most
is.
of it is because he's a dick
Yeah.
and like people don't want to play with him. He's very good.
Yeah, I
And,
can't
like,
really.
I was looking at him a little bit.
I can't really argue against that, but I feel like him being paired with BDL's might play kind of aggressively, but I don't feel like his best fit is with a pure support because BDL isn't really great at grabbing. I feel like he's a pretty good flag carrier, but coming from like a defensive background, like getting grabs and getting out of base doesn't really come instinctually to him.
Even with that, I don't think the offense is the problem.
Oh, definitely not. We'll get to that.
I don't want to say the problem. The offense, I think, is a little bit stronger than the defense on this team.
I mean, when you're Raven, and I don't want to like call it Raven or anything, but I feel like he's probably below average or close, not terribly below average, but probably below average as a majors defender. And you go out and you spend about 70 tag coins on offense, your defense isn't going to be that great.
Yeah.
Because he took Mr. Gone with 21, and I feel like neither of those defenders are particularly exceptional at any part of the game.
I mean, Mr. Gone might be good. He's kind of in the same boat that I was a couple of seasons ago, where it was like, oh, JJ, you've been on really good teams. Like, your minors team was good when you had TPR and Tyrus and Gem, and then your majors team was good when you played with TPR and Trovall and Grant. You're the fourth best player on that team. Like, we don't really know if you're good. And then people gave me crap. And I think I've turned out decently well after that. But, like, it's the same thing with Mr. Gone, where he played with Tyrus, Marquis, and Prism, and Khaleesi in minors. And then he played with Sidewalk and All Tiger and Milksteak. And, like, not that Mr. Gone isn't good, but, like, this is the opportunity to prove that he's good when he's not on as talented of a team.
Yeah.
He has a lot more responsibility to his team this season if they want to be good.
Yeah, I feel like if Mr. Gunn individually makes a jump, that could be like an impetus for this team being a lot better than I expect they will be. But I don't know if the position he's in is going to be that great. Last season he was on tiers. Trovall is probably one of the best captains at like maintaining chemistry and maintaining egos and stuff like that. And Mr. Gunn certainly has an ego when he's going to be partnered with Raven, who people might not know this, but I feel like Raven can also kind of have a bit of an ego to himself.
And Swinging definitely has an ego.
I think BDL is going to be like the most relaxed player on this team, and he might end up being the guy that has to cool everyone else off. But overall, I feel like the talent, as I said to begin talking about this team, I feel like the talent just isn't there to overcome some of the questions. Pretty much every team in the league has question marks, but a lot of them have exceptional talent that can make up for that, and I don't see that on this team.
I can see this team fighting for playoffs.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the biggest
surprise. They're not going to be
for
the worst team in the league, but I think that there are better teams.
I'm not very high on them. I wouldn't be surprised if they were competitive, but I just feel like there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and it would take a lot of things to go right for them to be in the discussion for top teams.
We've left out Poppy out of this discussion because, again, this is just hearing through the grapevine, but I've heard that he only signed up for MLTP just to see if he could be picked for majors, and he didn't really have much intention of playing. Like, that might be a whole thing. But Poppy's pretty good, but I just don't know if he's gonna be around.
Yeah, I don't see Poppy as a major starter just because, like we were talking about Cynical, like both of them are really good technical players, but they just have really, really bad attitudes that can be detrimental to the team. I wouldn't want either of them in my starting lineups, I'll say that.
That's understandable.
But yeah, overall, I think we've covered that team pretty well, and we're going to move on to the final team in this division, captained by you.
Saving the best for last, am I right?
I suppose you could say that. So you picked up your first overall pick was Risk for 15, and what was your mindset going into that?
So last season I picked Risk because he juked the crap out of me in a pub, like 3 different times in one pub. So I invited him to a tryout, and he was the best fly carrier there. So I just kind of took a flyer on him in the last couple rounds of the draft last season, and he turned out a lot better than I thought he was, and he's been working a lot. I mean, I don't want to say that I'm making him better, but he was like taking criticism and like coaching very well, and he's gotten a lot better. And you played with him in USC. We picked him up in USC when he was a nobody still, because I just knew he was active and he like wanted to get better, so I picked him up to help him out. He's turned into one of our better players, and we've been pretty good with like a lot due to him in USC.
I've played with him, and another player that I've been on teams with is Lipsy, and I would say that's a pretty good approximation of what Risk's like ceiling is. Like a player who's just gonna like hit a lot of really technical boosts and jukes and just be really impressive overall.
And Risk is insanely good at offensive defense.
In
Like I
terms of-
remember one of the first scrims I put him in last season in minors. We were playing Lag Brown, and I want to say it was like LeBron. It was past 3 or something, and Risk was like had Bally and it was either Rambo or Cynical. I guess it was really early on then, and Risk like split both the blocks and got a return on LeBron, and Bally stopped after the game was like, "Yo, Risk, you're really good at offensive defense." I don't want to say Risk isn't worth picking, but like I definitely focused in on him like way before the draft started. There's some like sentimental value there of taking somebody from pubs and bringing him up to majors.
Me and you actually had a deal in place for Risk where I wasn't gonna bid on Risk and you weren't gonna bid on D-Wiz, and obviously that didn't end up working out for me, but it ended up working out for you. And I was really actually hoping that someone would bid you up for Risk because I feel like if he hits his potential, he's gonna be.
I was willing to spend 40 on Risk if I had to.
Yeah, I was trying to. I mean, I wasn't like pushing really hard because I didn't really want to screw you over. Next pick, probably one of the more surprising picks that you made was actually not the most, but one of the more was Matrix for 55.
Matrix and Risk was the offense that I wanted. I was like helped out in the draft by Marquis, and we both had our eye on Matrix, and then we asked Risk who he might want to play with, and Matrix was at the top of that list too. So it kind of locked in that we were going to go after Matrix. We were willing to spend 100 on Risk and Matrix combined if we had to,
which
to get a nice offense.
Pretty much would have worked out for you because you only spent one on Shara. But staying on Matrix, I feel like him moving to the East kind of presented a really good opportunity for whoever ended up taking him because I've seen him play and he's a very complete player. There are really very few flaws in his game, and getting that for 55 might seem like a bit of an overspend because he isn't a huge name and he hasn't really performed at a high level in the East at least. But I feel like that's. I mean, if Risk and Matrix works out, I think that's going to be one of the better offenses.
He kicked my ass, and Stan and I played him in Region Wars.
Region Wars, yeah.
Yeah, and we were playing on Smirk. Stan and I are really good on Smirk, and Matrix was killing me. Yeah. Like I played a button, and I usually don't get juked on the button, and he was getting out almost whenever he wanted. And just playing him in USC a bunch kind of confirmed that it was a good pick.
You're tricking me into getting really high on your team, so I'm going to start saying some of my concerns. Neither Risk nor Matrix are guys that I really see as being like chemistry guys or guys that are going to like make like the small bump blocks and stuff that we've talked about. And I think both of them are really good like technical players, but against some of the better defenses, I think they're going to need a little extra chemistry and ability to work off each other. And
yeah, I can see that.
And from what I've seen in Risk in USC, he's not always the guy that's going to like sacrifice in those situations. Overall, I don't think it'll be a huge problem, but I think it could be a downfall.
They definitely have some like chemistry stuff to work on, obviously, because I think they've both kind of been number one guys. Like Stalin and I'm High are a very good pair, just in terms of chemistry and stuff like that. But I think if Risk and Matrix can figure stuff out, they might have the most talent as an offensive pair. I think Risk might be the most talented second offensive player on any team. Again, I'm probably biased, but
so after taking Risk and Matrix, I think you were feeling really good about yourself. You had some coins to spend with,
and we had tons of money left.
And then you went ahead and nominated Wayne. So what was going through your head at that point?
We wanted somebody for defense that we thought was gonna push the 35 coins that we had left, and so we wanted to kind of like waste our pick to try to have
if you could win
other teams. Yeah, if other teams might spend their money, and then we could like kind of like sneak this player in. So we wanted to waste a player that we thought somebody would bid at least one on, and so we nominated Wayne, and it didn't work out that way.
Yeah, clearly. But given that you wasted that roster spot, you kind of at least made a little bit out of it, made a little lemonade out of that, all those lemons, and got.
Yeah, we ended up trading Wayne for a second-round pick, and then we flipped fourth-round picks. Yeah. So we moved up a little bit in the fourth round too. With
your final pick, I think you fulfilled everyone's stereotype and picked up a Euro as your defensive partner. But having played with Shara in the past, he is a very, very smart player.
Oh, for sure. And I don't think his ping affects him all that much. He's very good on American servers. Marquis and I were looking for Shara as our fifth man, but we would have been plenty okay with having him start majors, which is kind of what we'd like. Like I said, I was willing to spend 100 on offense if I had to, and then pick Shara as my fourth player. So like that was kind of what I expected, but I was kind of hoping that there might be a chance to get another American defender, I guess, is the safe way to put it. Yeah. But I'm more than happy to play with Shara again. I've played with Shara for over a year now, more than any other defender that hasn't been you. I've played with Shara.
Probably the biggest question mark about him is not only his ping, but also his sign-up didn't make it so evident that he would be particularly active. So I think with Matrix also signing up, I mean, I think he's been more active than his sign-up would indicate, but for his sign-up, he put that he wouldn't be very active. So do you think you're going to be able to practice with the same consistency that you have in the last seasons?
Yeah, I mean, I made that tryout post yesterday on Thanksgiving, and I had every single one of my players there at the tryout on Thanksgiving, helping out, scouting, writing some stuff down about the players that were there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not too worried about commitment, at least at this point. I'm the only team right now that only has 4 players. I still have a little bit of work to do in the snake.
Yeah, I think you're helped by the fact that you have, the second or third overall pick in the snake?
Second, yep.
Yeah, I think if you can get everyone active and maintain that activity and work out all the chemistry issues, I think you're gonna have a really strong team.
Thanks. I'm not gonna hype up my team too much.
All right. So overall, looking at this division as we're gonna close out this podcast, I think this is like a really expected thing to happen. But I think my team and your team are gonna be two of the best. And like obviously
Maybe.
Both of us are biased, and I know you don't want to hype up your team too much.
I'm not
gonna
say anything.
I feel like I'm not really in a great position to hype up my team too much, but I just don't think. I think there are huge question marks for the other two teams in our division. I don't think either of us have like particularly amazing rosters. If things go as expected, like both of us will be more consistent than the other two. To finish off this podcast, but again, I'd like to thank JJ for following me through all these teams, and thank all the listeners. At some point, I'll be doing another podcast. I might do a wrap up on the snake draft that's going to be going on in a couple days, or we'll see. It might be something completely different. But again, thanks for stopping by, JJ.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. All right. Enjoy the rest of your week, guys. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving.
Yeah.